Welcome, Dr. Nitin, on your PDA Education, and thanks a lot for giving your precious time to us, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay. Professor Nitin, today I have invited you for discussion, and on this platform there are many students or technocrats who are aspiring for career in higher education and career in technical fields. So interaction with you will be very relevant in that direction, sir. And I have made some kind of questionnaire on the basis of your profile, which I studied from the site. So on the basis of that, I have some certain questions, and I initiate the discussion in that direction only. So
Sure.
my first question to you, sir, is your. I was going through your academic journey. You graduate from IIT Kanpur only, and then after your post graduation, you joined as faculty in IIT Kanpur. So I want to know briefly, sir, about your academic journey from IIT Kanpur to IIT Kanpur.
Right. So I finished my BTech in 2002. So 1998 to 2002, I was here in IIT Kanpur as a BTech student. I completed my BTech in Computer Science and Engineering. And after 2002, or during 2001 to 2002, I got interested in problems that Professor Manind Agarwal would work on. So in particular, de-randomization, Boolean circuits, algebraic problems, primality testing in particular. And I got to know some of his friends who were working on these problems as part of their undergraduate thesis, BTP. He used to call it BTech project. So as BTP, our students suggested to me and Neeraj to maybe take it up as a BTP because he was graduating. So then we worked on it for 1 year, and because of that, because of the interaction, we decided that we'll continue our PhD here. So directly from BTech, actually, we moved to PhD. So then till 2006, we did our PhD thesis, and in 2006 we submitted it. So 2006 was my when I finished my BTech plus PhD, and then after that I went for postdoc and other positions. Even actually during my PhD, I was here only for 2 years. The other 2 years, 2003, I went to Princeton. I was a visiting student there. And in subsequent year, 2004, I was in Singapore, in NUS, National University of Singapore, again as a visiting student. In fact, in Singapore, I was also helping in the tutorials and some basic courses. I was helping the students also. So those experiences were quite nice. I didn't have to just stay in one place, but actually I saw 2 more places and 2 different continents altogether. So that was quite enriching. After I submitted my PhD thesis in 2006, I went for a postdoc to Europe. So I was a postdoc in this Dutch Institute for Science and Mathematics in Amsterdam. It is called CWI, but it basically means the Dutch Center for Math and Computer Science. Right. So I was there for almost 1.5 years, 2006 end to 2008 beginning, as a postdoc. So there I worked mostly alone. I was part of a group, but I was working mostly alone. I mean, we didn't have a official supervisor or any such hierarchy. Was quite free there, so it was a different experience. It was a good transition actually. After PhD, it was a good transition to bigger things. I mean, you get some time where you are completely independent, and you explore this, you fail, then you explore something else, you again fail, and then you explore a third thing, and maybe you succeed, and so on. So it was a good experience there, both culturally and professionally. And then I got an opportunity for a longer term position in Bonn. So I joined there in 2008. So 2008 to 2013, I was a professor there. And they gave me a lot of, I mean, complete independence was given, and plus funds were given for, I had funds for PhD students postdoc. So that I think was the stay which I enjoyed the most abroad, because I was in a math department. It was a center for mathematics. It was the best in Germany. They had in fact won an award which which basically helped them to set up this center for maths. It was called Hausdorff Center for Maths.
Okay.
It actually still exists. It got an extension, so it is still there. So in the first 5 years of it, I was a faculty there, and I graduated many students. So they have a system where students get a diploma thesis. So I graduated many diploma students. You can compare it with the masters here in India. So I graduated diploma students, master students, PhD students, postdoc, published many things, worked on new problems, new approaches. And also culturally, I enjoyed the place. So both in terms of life and profession, it was a very good place, helped me a lot and learned a lot. And then in 2013, I decided that it is time to move back. So I joined IIT Kanpur in April 2013. So since then, I have been here. So various stages. I joined as an associate professor, then I became a full professor. Now I am a chair professor. And again, the same thing continues. I maintain a group of good students at all levels. So bachelor, MS, masters, which is MTech here, PhD, and I also had a postdoc a year ago. So these are students who I kind of train through my courses and then through projects and then finally through meetings, one-to-one meetings, and then they eventually do good work with me.
Yeah, Dr. Nitin, graduate from IITs, normally they get attracted toward corporate jobs, abroad opportunities and all. You are yourself graduate from IIT Kanpur, and that too from computer science, the department in which very less students will go for higher education and compromise their very good opportunities in corporate and abroad. So I want to ask you, what made you come back to IIT Kanpur and not join those kind of opportunities?
Okay, so is your question about corporate versus academics? Yes, or other institutes versus IIT Kanpur?
No, my question is about two things, sir. Number one, why not corporate jobs? And second, why only India? Why not abroad, even if it is teaching
academics?
Job?
Okay. Yeah. So the answer to the first question, which is corporate versus academics. So that distinction I always had. Like I think even in class 8th or class 10th, I never wanted to do a regular job.
Okay.
I had no interest in regular jobs, in joining any corporate or joining bureaucracy. And my only interest was in certain types of mathematical problems. And so the question was, at that age, the question is, how will you get into this? How can you solve something? And how can you write thesis? How can you work in that area? And then even if you can do something in class 12, say you are very good in math, the fear and the worry is whether you can do something really new. And whether you can actually do it as a profession for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right?
Right.
Because this is a very long time. So can you actually stay in the same area for decades and do something, keep doing something new? So those fears were there. But the other side was that I was just interested in that stuff. So fortunately, I would say this is a matter of luck. Fortunately, things kept falling in place so that I can continue to do what I was interested in for decades. And so this option was not there for me, I would say. I mean, this option which majority of the students have, they have an option of going to corporate versus they have an option of joining academia. This option never existed for me.
Okay.
So my only option was whether I can do good in academia or I will do bad in academia.
Okay.
And fortunately, till now, I've been doing okay in academia. Okay. So that is the answer to the first question.
Yes.
Second is why India and why IIT Kanpur. That is mostly to do with culture and individual choices. So I am from Allahabad. which is now called Prayagraj. And my family has lived there forever. And then I also joined IIT Kanpur. I was officially I was a student here for 8 years. So because of all that, it was easy for me to actually join back IIT Kanpur. And also IIT Kanpur has actually a very good reputation in theoretical studies. So once I joined, I saw that actually I am getting students. See, you also have to get students. You also have to form a group.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, you can join anywhere. But if you are not getting students, and if you are not able to form a group,
Mm-hmm.
if you are not able to get funding,
Mm-hmm.
then you will have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So just emotions won't be enough. So fortunately, and the way IIT Kanpur is, the way its reputation is, it is considered a scientific institute, scientifically advanced. Focus is on science together with engineering and humanities. But the focus always has been on science. And students somehow, even from faraway places like from Kerala or from Northeast or from West or from Punjab. So I have students from all the places. So this glory of or this understanding of Kanpur is there across India. So I keep getting students, at least till now it has been the case. And then they also perform in the end. Initially, they may not be very good. They may have confidence problems or they may not have gotten that foundation to do the right kind of maths or the right kind of research, or they haven't asked the correct questions. But then once they are here, I train them and we together learn and grow.
Mm-hmm.
So that has worked till now. So that hopefully answers your second question.
Professor Nitin, you mentioned about a new thing which I am listening, which you mentioned about forming group of BTech, MTech, MS, PhD students, and maybe postdoc.
Right. Yes.
So, Dr. Nitin, what is the meaning of this? Forming group means what? Can you please clarify that?
Yeah. So I mean that see you may be a good researcher independently or with senior people. You have worked before, you have published, you have a reputation. But then when you become a faculty, then you also have to become a mentor.
Right.
So you have to actually mentor and train the next generation.
Very true.
Who are completely different from your peers. So your peers already know what the problems are and what is the frontier of science or maths. And in that frontier, what problems they can work on, where can they publish. Now, these things, the next generation and the younger researchers don't understand. They don't know. They come here, I mean, they have just graduated maybe from school, high school, college, right? They have done some courses, they have gotten some good grades. But they, for example, they may not even have read advanced papers, research articles. The research articles which were published this year or last year or previous to that, those things they are not aware of. So that mentoring is a different profession altogether. I mean, when we join as faculty, we actually have to learn how to mentor. And even if you get a good student, you still have to mentor. So if you start mentoring and if you start doing work with them and you are successful, you make them confident, then more students join and you get us, let's say a small group of 5-6 students who are interested in your problems and you meet. So for example, I meet them every week.
Okay.
I meet them together or I meet them separately. And we try to work on problems which are not yet solved. So new problems which are not solved, new approaches. And once we, after a lot of hard work, once we are at a stage where we have something new, then we publish it. So all this is happening in a group. Yeah, so this can also happen alone.
Okay.
I mean, there are some people who do it alone. But ideally in a university, you want to mentor the next generation. So ideally, you actually want to do this with the younger people.
Right.
So that they become the future leaders of the field.
Very true.
This is how we take it forward.
Okay. Dr. Nitin, you mentioned about MTech, MS, etc. So there is always a confusion among students also that how this MTech course and MS courses are different. So what are the pros and cons, and what is MS actually? So that is not very clear because this demarcation is not there in foreign universities. So would you like to tell something about that, sir?
Yeah, so our in the actually not just in computer science department, but in our whole institute, MTech is the prestigious program with a long standing.
Okay.
Like, if I am not wrong, I think institute must have started giving MTech when the institute was formed.
Right.
So probably from 1970s.
Right.
So I think MTech and PhD are the first programs which a university when it starts giving, so that it attracts some teachers, and then teachers and these students who graduate become get PhD, they become the faculty.
Right.
And then when they have enough faculty, then they start teaching undergraduates.
Right.
So in that sense, PhD and MTech are very old programs. MS actually happened, it was started here after I joined. So it probably is only 5 years old here.
Okay.
Although in some form it has existed in other institutes.
Okay.
Like IIT Madras, ISC, so these IIT Bombay also probably. So it probably existed there before us. And then 5 years ago, around that time, our Senate approved MS here also. I would say that there is not much difference. I mean, student will actually not see any difference.
Okay.
The major difference is in terms of MS, the student can continue after 2 years also. So if the project demands and if there is funding, if there is a way to give the stipend, then the student can conveniently continue till the end of third year. That is one practical kind of advantage or one difference which you can see. MTech, on the other hand, it's almost a strict rule that you have to finish in 2 years.
Okay.
I mean, any extension beyond 2 years is very difficult, and I mean it is very time bounded after 2 years. Okay. They won't allow you to actually stay in the campus and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Second thing is that MS, the thesis evaluation is done kind of externally.
Right.
So in the thesis committee, there is an external member. So you can say that it can be more rigorous. So you have to convince somebody outside IIT Kanpur that you have done a good thesis. So those, I think, are the two places where there is a big difference.
Okay.
Other than that, there is hardly any difference. There might be some differences in how many courses you will do.
Okay.
But I think those are minor differences. The major differences are these two. That you can get possibly more time.
Okay.
And you will be externally examined. So you have to do a very good convincing in the thesis committee.
Great. Dr. Nitin, in one of my interaction with the director of IIT Ropar, Dr. Das, I asked him a question that, sir, why less students aspire to get into PhDs? And he gave me a point. And the point was like in India, as compared to abroad, the postdoctorate fellowship or the career after PhD, the student when he's doing PhD cannot see that particular thing. That security is not there in the mind, maybe because postdoctorate fellowships are very less in our country. So, sir, what is your view on that? Once somebody does PhD, then what are the opportunities for postdoctorate fellowship in India itself?
See, I would say that it will depend on the quality of the PhD. So if the PhD thesis was good, it is well recognized, the work is recognized, and by recognized I mean not just that the student has a large number of publications in low quality venues.
Okay.
So that is what is happening many times, that students are publishing a lot, but all these conferences or journals are low quality. I think that is a negative thing. The way to do PhD positively will be that you publish some papers, but they should all be in very high quality venues. Your work should be well known. Assuming that, I think there is enough postdoc opportunities in India. Because you just look at the number of IITs, only IITs. There are also other institutes, but if you just look at IITs, then in every IIT there are several faculty members who get projects. So the project always comes with postdoc funding.
Okay.
I mean, every project that the government or the industry gives us, the bulk of the money, I mean, either it is to buy equipment or it is to hire employees.
Okay.
And these employees are PhDs.
PhDs.
So actually, all that money which IIT projects are getting, this is mainly for human resource. So I wouldn't say that the postdoc opportunities are less. If you are good, I think they are there. And in the future, they might only increase because the faculty are being pushed more and more to get projects.
Okay.
And the more projects there are, they will actually go to either train PhDs or to hire employees who will basically be postdocs.
Right, sir.
But your security point is more to do with the timeline and what will happen after that.
Right.
So those risks are there. That is
they remain. Okay.
They remain.
Dr. Nitin, you have your own experience of postdoctorate fellowship abroad. So
Yes.
if I ask you very precisely that a student who is doing PhD in India and he aspires to go for postdoctorate fellowship abroad with good professor in good university, what are the most important key points he should focus on?
No, so the key point I already told you, the quality of the thesis.
Okay.
Yeah, that I think is the most important parameter. Because once you, so say you did your PhD and your BTech from a small place,
right,
whose exposure to the outside world is very small.
Right.
So you can be great there, you can be great in a small place, but once you go out of that small place, then why will people recognize you?
Right.
So for a PhD, actually, it is very important that the people recognize you because of your work, which you have published in venues.
Okay.
Some of which may be also in good Indian venues, but they should definitely be in good abroad venues also, so that you have, I mean, it is also good for India that Indian scientists are publishing abroad.
Okay.
Right? You want Indian scientists to be visible outside India.
Okay.
You don't want all the Indian scientists to be publishing only in India.
Okay.
So you want that work to be visible outside. So
okay.
There has to be a balance. I mean, it depends on the area, of course. I don't know all the areas. But in my area, for example, there are one or two venues where I can publish in India. But all the other venues are international conferences. So I have to publish abroad. And that is how you get visibility.
Okay.
So if the student has that visibility, then I think after that there is no other parameter. Then you apply anywhere. I mean, anywhere where your area related faculty is there, you apply to that faculty, or it may also be a lab, some international lab where work is being done in your area, and they would take you.
So visibility also means, sir, connectivity with the professor whose work is matching your profile.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so that is
no, that is very important. If you apply to a professor who is in a different area, obviously, they might just delete your email.
Yeah,
which is what I do.
Yeah,
I always delete those emails because I already get internship applications in my area.
Okay.
So why should I look at other area applicants? I mean, it makes no sense.
Okay, great. Now, Dr. Nitin, I come back to certain other domains of questions. My next question to you is, you Infosys PhD fellowship you got. So can you, sir, mention about that? What was this?
Yeah, so actually Infosys has been amazingly generous to IIT Kanpur. So Infosys and Infosys founders, especially also personally, they have donated very generously to the resources, to improve the resources, both infrastructure and human resources in IIT Kanpur. So Infosys PhD fellowship was, I don't think it exists now.
Okay.
But when I was a BTech student, then that option was there. That I think up to 2 students can be funded every year through that fellowship, Infosys PhD fellowship. So see, in my time, BTech students were not doing PhD in India.
PhD, yes, that's true.
So in 2002, both Neeraj and I were kind of the only applicants. Like if you go back 5 years from that point, Nobody had applied.
Yeah.
So we were the only ones who applied. So it was pretty easy to get that fellowship. But it was open to, I think, also other applicants. Potentially, it was open to other applicants. But we were amongst the best of the applicants, so we easily caught it. And that fellowship gave us a monthly stipend, so we did not have to use the government stipend.
Okay.
We were funded by the Infosys stipend,
okay.
Which was more than what the government used to pay. Okay. And plus, it came with travel money. I think it had enough travel money. It came with enough travel money and equipment and consumables, books, etc. So all those advantages were there. So we never faced any problem of money during PhD.
Okay, great. So my next question to you is related to your research area. I could see computational complexity theory is the domain in which you are working. So can you please elaborate on that, what this area is all about, this research area?
Yeah, so as the term suggests, so computational means anything you do on any machine. Right. It can be any machine. It can be this laptop, a smartphone, your digital watch. So all these things are now computational devices. And complexity means that the problem that you are interested to solve. How fast can you solve that problem? So you basically, it may be a practical problem, or it may be a mathematical problem. It may be an app. So you actually bring it down at the level of a computer, and you ask whether I can solve that problem on a computer. And first of all, can it be solved? That is the first question. So actually, there are problems which cannot be solved on a computer. So we are aware of those problems. We have proofs that these problems are impossible to solve on a computer, no matter how fast your computer is. Okay. So I mean, they will remain unsolvable even after 100 years of progress. Okay. So they are just impossible to solve. So that is one point. Even that actually students have to understand. Students may not know that. So students should realize that there are problems which are impossible to solve on computer now, and also 100 years hence, and also 1000 years hence. Okay. There's just no chance of them being solvable. Second is now problems which can be solved on a computer, but then you have to ask how much time will it take. So maybe when you run this program, it takes 1 second, or maybe it takes 1 hour, or it takes 1 day, or it takes 1 year. Because we have supercomputers, so we can actually leave the problem running on the computer, and we can wait for 1 day or 1 year. Right? It can continue, and then after a year, it will solve it. So that measurement is what we study in computational complexity theory. Okay. That is exactly the meaning of context. That is exactly the context.
Okay. So is this related to your working in a mathematics department, which you just now mentioned, that abroad you were working in mathematics department? So has it anything to do with that experience of yours?
Yeah. So the thing is that since it is theory, it is called computational complexity theory. So it is not programming. Okay. It is more about the abstraction of these questions. Okay. That so say you are interested in multiplying two numbers. Okay. So you are given two numbers, each is of n bits, and you want to understand how fast can you multiply them, or even how fast can you add them. Okay. Adding two n-bit numbers, how fast can you do it? So when you ask the question how fast, then somebody may say that what do you mean, on what computer? On the smartphone, or on your laptop, or on your laptop which is i5 or i6 or i7 or i8 or i9, right? So what model? So you can either go into that domain, which will be about implementation. So these are questions about actually implementation, that how fast can you implement and on what architecture. So that is what the systems people do, actually implement and see which architecture is better. In theory, what we do is that we abstract it out as a mathematical question. And we say that, okay, forget about what architecture computer it is. I want some answer which will remain true for any architecture. So an architecture which was 20 years old, or a computer which is currently being available in the market, or a computer will be available 100 years hence. My statement should be true for every kind of computer. So that is what we do in theory. So actually at this point it becomes mathematics.
Okay.
So this is more of a question in mathematics. So which is why you can study it in mathematics or you can study it in computer science.
Okay. Dr. Nitin, do you advise computer graduates to go for higher education in interdisciplinary departments, something like mathematics department or something like that? So
yeah, this is already happening.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. This always happens. Okay. Mathematics graduates, they get interested in computer science.
Okay.
And computer science graduates become interested in mathematics, in physics.
Okay.
And maybe other areas of engineering. So this distinction is not very clear.
Okay. My next question to you is related to the industrial application of what research work you are doing.
Okay, so so actually industrial application of so I basically work in algebraic problems. So the questions which interest me the most are algebraic questions. So will your students understand algebra?
Sir, you speak because majority are computer graduates also, which will listen to you.
Okay.
So I think they will understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So algebra is a basic topic which is taught especially in class 11th and 12th.
Yeah.
And obviously before class 10th also you have to learn algebra because you have to solve these questions, right? That 2x is equal to 6.
Yeah.
So I mean 2 is something, and then you have to find an unknown number so that when you multiply them you get 6. So these kind of questions are modeled using algebraic formulas, and then you solve them. So 2x equal to 6, you will write, and then you will say, okay, hence x is equal to 6 by 2, which is equal to 3. So x is equal to 3. So as soon as you start talking about unknown values, you are into algebra because you have to use symbols, you have to use alphabets. So as you take it forward, it becomes very advanced, and actually it at some point it covers the whole of mathematics, because algebra is just playing with symbols, but to do anything new you actually have to use other ideas. So actually geometry will enter, analysis will enter, number theory will enter, so all kinds of things, differential geometry will enter. So everything actually becomes then like any area in maths can be applied to algebra in a way. And hence now computer science also uses algebra a lot. So many of the algebraic concepts were critical in designing computers in the 1950s. So 1950s, as the computer were being built, there were many questions which actually got solved because of algebraic ideas and because of mathematical ideas. So first they were solved theoretically, and once the theoretical understanding was there, then they were implemented using physical devices. So for example, these diodes, these valves, and then came the microprocessor chips, which is based on silicon devices,
right?
Which made it smaller, basically. It became smaller and faster, and which is still happening.
Right.
Like since 1970s, it has become every year smaller and smaller and smaller and faster and faster. So what are these questions which mathematicians or algebraic problems which they solve? I can mention one or two things. First problem is, say your hard disk. So in hard disk, you want to store data, but your hard disk is made up of physical circuits, and it always happens that some of the circuits break down. I mean, because it was monsoon, or because it was too hot, or because it was too cold. So what happens is that some of the circuitry breaks down, and this is always happening. You cannot stop it. You cannot design a hard disk where everything will work perfectly. So some circuits will break down. So, but still you want to store information, right? So you store information, you store video, you store movies, and when you run the movie, it will work fine, although your hard disk has some corrupted bits. So how does that work? So that is actually, there is something called error correcting codes. So the hard disk coding is designed in a way so that even if some of the circuits break down, still you can recover the information. So that is the basic question, and that is the basic principle that you have to come up with. You have to somehow come up with an encoding so that, let's say, if 10% of the device fails, which can be your hard disk or which can be this wire. So over wire, you send information from one computer to the other computer, or through air, like wireless, right? You are sending information from one phone to the next phone through air. So again, in air, the signals get corrupted.
Okay.
It's very fragile. I mean, things actually get corrupted. You send 0, and on the other side, they hear 1. But still, you are able to communicate. So you are able to communicate because actually the information is sent in a coded way. And in the code, when some corruption happens, let's say 10% corruption happens. Obviously, if 100% corruption happens, you cannot do anything.
Right.
If you cut the wire, then obviously the current will not flow. That is impossible.
Right.
But suppose the wire only has some damage, just 10% damage. So that 10% is actually taken care of by the coding. So those codes are algebraic codes.
Okay.
So that is one very important application of algebraic codes and some of the basic algebra which people developed long time back. In already 1950s, 60s, they had developed it. That is one thing. The other thing which is more modern is security. So for example, Zoom may claim that Zoom is happening over a secure channel. So what is the meaning of secure channel? And when you do banking, or in fact, whenever you open a web page which says HTTPS, so what is that S? What is the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? So that difference is also because of algebra.
Okay.
So that security, or if you look at the security protocols, I mean, the students here are already, they have access to all kinds of sources online. So they just search for the details of HTTPS. What is HTTPS using? So they will see on Wikipedia and in Google, they will see that HTTPS is using RSA or it is using digital signatures. So when they read the actual signature description or RSA protocol, they will see algebraic algorithms, number theory algorithms. So that is where again the basic algebra is being used.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Nitin, I want to discuss with you some of the recent projects on which you are working. Industrial projects or government projects. Yeah.
Okay. So since 2013 to now, in the last 7 years, I got funding from DST and from SERB. So both are government bodies. And they funded me for different mathematical problems. So I can mention some of them. One is to study circuits. So just like electronic circuits, we in algebra community or in complexity community, computer science community, we abstract from the electronic circuit something more mathematical, on which we can apply mathematical tools. We can do some mathematical analysis. So those things I call algebraic circuits. So problems related to algebraic circuits is what I'm interested in. So again, the question will be of this type. You are interested in some problem and you will ask the question, if you want to solve it by a circuit, how big or how small the circuit will be. So this is a question of lower bounds. Lower bound means you want to say that, okay, the circuit that will solve my problem will have to be big, and then how big. So that is the lower bound problem. There are questions about circuit algorithms, whether a circuit is computing zero, so which we call zero testing of circuits. I work in that problem. The problem of factoring a circuit. You are given a circuit, you want to break it down into smaller circuits, which are somehow related to the original circuit. So factorization question, or you want to find roots of a circuit. So you want to find points at which the circuit will become zero. So that is the question of finding roots of a circuit. Or you may want to find how independent circuits are. You are given two circuits. You want to find out how correlated they are. Are they very different or are they similar? So it is the question of algebraic dependence. So there are many problems just related to circuits, and I work on all of them. So every year I have some progress in these questions, and most of the questions are actually old open problems. They are not completely solved. So we actually solve small pieces. Every year we find some bricks, and ultimately the hope is that using all these bricks we'll make a big palace.
Okay. Okay.
That
Dr.
is it.
Nitin, like IITs are the premium institute with the faculty like you who can contribute really in a great way for research. And industries, on the other hand, sometimes face the problem for which they may require help of academic institutes like yours. So, what do you think is the situation as of now where the premium institutes and faculty in premium institutes are solving the industrial problems through consultancy or something? What is the situation?
So that may be dependent on the institute and the department. So
Okay.
in IIT Kanpur also there are some departments where faculty help the industry. They do consultancy, and if you look at faculty who are working in theoretical studies, they understandably so may not have so much of contact with the industry.
Okay.
Uh, there are many reasons. One is that we may simply not have the time for that. I mean, if you promise some industry that you will solve their problem, then you actually have to solve it.
Right.
I mean, you have to give it time.
Yes.
You have to talk to them continuously. You have to give them time. You have to find students who work in that problem, and then you have to actually deliver the product. So that all that takes a lot of time. So maybe it is a matter of time or it is a matter of interest. I mean, faculty, somebody may actually not be interested in that. But I'm sure that there are people who are interested in that and they already do consultancy. So it's happening. But yeah, maybe if your question is that it should increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe there is a scope for increasing that. Yeah.
Because it's a very
That is
important.
there.
It is very important link for industry academia interaction. What we talk about, I
Yes.
think through which students also get to learn
Right. Yeah.
through projects. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that yeah, you have to again form a certain group where your students actually are interested in that, because not everything can a faculty do.
Okay.
A faculty is doing many things.
Yeah.
So yeah, we actually also have to form a group and then set up the industry contact. And some faculty members are very good in that.
Okay. Okay. Good.
They are already doing it.
Dr. Nitin, you also mentioned about forming the group of students, and also you said that when some student approaches you for internship, if it is not relevant, you will not see to that. So my
Yes.
next question to you is, if some student for internship who is in graduation or for MS course or for PhD course, he's interested under working under you for your projects. What do
Right.
you look in that particular student, if you can tell that?
See, the first thing is, it almost always what happens is these students who I get from other institutes, they are not well trained in my areas. So I actually so I don't even test students on that. I don't expect them to know the frontiers of my research, because that actually other institutes don't train students in that. So
Yeah.
it is just not possible. What I see is the things that they learned, let's say in basic theory of computation,
Yes.
or even in basic algebra.
Mhm.
They did some courses in algebra, let us say. They did courses in number theory.
Mhm.
Or even if they did courses in analysis, in calculus.
Mhm.
So they did such courses and they obviously they performed well. But not only did they get good grades, they got interested in those topics. And so I asked them, first of all, I want to test whether they actually understood those courses. It says they might have done algorithms, data structures. So whether they actually understood those courses and what is the level of interest in those courses. So are they really interested? I ask them, are there problems in those courses or in those areas in general? Are there problems on which they would want to spend 1 or 2 months?
Mhm.
So if they show interest and capability, like in this context, then I think I take them.
Mm-hmm.
I take them for first for a project,
Mm-hmm.
then actually for thesis work,
Mm-hmm.
which can be MTech, MS thesis work, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately for PhD thesis work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a step-by-step process. I
Okay.
don't expect them to immediately jump to PhD thesis work,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
because that is impossible here. I mean, it is very rare that I get a student
Mm-hmm.
who is already ready for PhD thesis.
Yeah. So a student from ordinary college in India
Right.
can also think of working under you, sir, if he prepares himself for that.
Yeah, obviously, and there are many steps that he or she has to cross. I
Okay.
mean, first is they have to give GATE.
Yeah.
They have to perform in the GATE exam. In the GATE exam, they will be tested on many areas in computer science. It will not be just math or theory.
Right,
It
sir.
will be other areas also. So they have to have that basic level understanding.
Right, sir.
And then they have to cross our internal screening.
Mm-hmm.
So in the department, we have a screening mechanism.
Okay.
They also have to cross that screening mechanism. So after that, we expect that the students have like the basic understanding of computer science.
Okay.
But to come into my area, then I do what I just described. So, I mean, what is it that the student is interested in
Mm-hmm.
my area? Is there something close to my area,
Okay.
which
Okay.
which they are good at, or which?
Okay.
So mostly it is about the interest and how dedicated the student is.
Great.
What
Great.
is the sincerity level?
Right, sir. Sir, if some student want to go for entrepreneurship or start
Right.
his own venture,
Right.
what are the scopes related to your domain of research, Professor?
Yeah. So see, algorithms these days run the humankind.
Right.
So almost anything you do,
Right.
they are based on algorithms. So in
Right.
that sense, my students can do anything.
Right.
They can join any industry, any software industry, and they can design algorithms.
Right.
They can join Google, Facebook, whatever. But that is being too general. If you come very specifically to my area, then I would say that the entrepreneurial opportunities may lie in, for example, they may become a cyber security analyst.
Okay.
So, for example, other companies who have which are running on apps. So, other companies their clients contact their apps, and that is how they do business. Or they have internet portals, websites. So they may hire a cybersecurity analyst to test for vulnerabilities. Like, can the app be hacked? Can somebody attack the website? Can other countries, like you know the nicknames of other countries who are always attacking Indian companies.
Right, sir.
Can those countries attack your website and your app or your homepage? So that needs a lot of cyber security analysis.
Okay.
So for that, I think in India, always analysts are needed. We actually have a dearth of analysts in that. So if somebody has experience
Mm-hmm.
and interest, then I think that is one option. Second is investigating cyber crimes. So once a crime happens, a cyber crime happens, what is the investigation you can do? Can you find out the source of it? How was it done? Why was it done? Can you help the police? Can you help intelligence, civil intelligence or military intelligence? So actually government officials are always looking for such experts. They don't get such experts.
Okay.
And government themselves don't have enough experts. I mean, the amount of cybercrime that happens. So that is one thing. Then banks obviously want every system to be very secure because there is so much of money involved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people within the bank may be actually doing things which are cybercrime, right? Not just outside. So I think those opportunities are everywhere.
Okay. Okay.
But you have to be trained in that.
Right.
Once you have the training, I think there is a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities.
Okay.
This is just a few examples.
Right. So, Dr. Nitin, one of my last question to you now is, you see, this computer science is a branch in which normally students get the job easily. That is not a
Right.
problem
Mhm.
from anywhere. Now, why a student from computer science? You are a typical example of graduate from the top-notch institute and getting into academics. So, can you please tell me why a student who is graduate in computer science should opt for higher education and go for
Right.
PhD or teaching?
Yeah, so I would say that not everybody should go for higher education.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, higher education, there are two things. First of all, not everyone can get into higher education.
Yeah.
And second is that
Not everybody should go.
not everybody in higher education can get a job.
Yeah, yeah, that is also clear.
Yeah, so I mean, if there are too many overqualified people and there are not enough jobs,
Yeah, yeah,
then you have to do some job where you are overqualified.
yeah, yeah.
So those issues are there. But I mean, removing all those fears, when you want to make a decision, then I think a student should first think whether he or she wants to spend time in that area.
Okay.
And that way, do you like a university environment, for
Mhm.
example?
Mhm.
Do you want to live in a university? Do you want to spend time in a university? The jobs that you have to do in a university, you have to teach students, you have to mentor them,
Mhm.
you have to think about problems which are very hard, which other people have not been able to solve.
Mhm.
You have to read papers which are being published every day.
Mhm.
So these are jobs for which you have to be interested in. If you hate these jobs, then you should not be doing it. So you have to actually see what is your love, in which what kind of jobs you love, and whether you love an area.
Mhm.
That is the first thing. If that interest and love is there, then I think it is a good choice,
Mhm.
because whatever challenges there will be, you will be able to take them because you are interested in it. So you will be able to match up to the challenges and actually even overcome the challenges. You will be able to go beyond.
Great, sir.
Uh, the other thing is, if you are not interested in these things, but you are interested in, let's say, starting a company, you want to do a startup, or you want to work in a company,
Mhm.
you want to do programming all the time, but not academic, with no academic focus. You actually want to program to build a product which you want to sell.
Mhm.
So then you should go to industry. I
Mhm.
mean, you should be either you are in some industrial environment, or you are trying to get funding to start a company.
Okay. Okay.
Then that is where you should go. You should not think that if I do a master's or PhD,
Mhm.
then I will be
Okay.
better doing that.
Okay. Okay.
So actually, I think it will be based on interest. Obviously, in real life, there will also be other constraints.
Right.
Maybe your family needs money.
Yeah.
Then you cannot invest your whole life doing PhD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it will all be a complex decision
Mhm.
based on the reality and based on your interests.
Okay.
And I would say that higher education is not for everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is okay if you don't want to do higher education. That is also fine.
Okay.
And if you really want to do higher education,
You should go.
then you should definitely go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Nathan, my last question to you is, sir, there are my audience on my channel are the graduates who are in all the colleges in India. There are many colleges in which they are not as lucky to have mentors or professors or teachers like you.
Right.
So through this interaction, I want you to give your some words of advice to all those students who are graduating from such colleges
Yeah.
where they may be requiring your advice for
No, I
good career.
think no. I think in the last 1 hour, I have already over
Yeah,
advised them.
yeah, that is true.
So they are already over advised.
Okay.
So I don't think I will give any more general advice. But I wanted to say that many of your students must already be doing NPTEL courses.
Yeah, they are. Yes.
Yeah. So there is this government funded. I mean, it is completely funded by the government.
That is very
It's free
helpful.
for everyone. Yeah,
Right.
it is free for everyone. Government funds a big money for that. It is run mainly by the IITs and IISc.
Mm.
And the faculty are all highly trained because they're all from IIT ISc. And computer science has already enough courses there. Computer science math already has enough courses, and I have also started teaching there.
Okay.
Yeah, so since last 1 year, I have basically planned to put all my courses in NPTEL form.
Great.
Yeah, so I have been successful in doing in creating 3 of them.
Okay.
And 3 more will come. So I think by next year or after, subsequent to that, all my courses will be in NPTEL form.
So these courses are available, Dr. Nitin?
Yeah, so already one course of mine was offered in the January.
Sir, can you
term.
please mention the course name also? That will be very good.
Actually, they can simply search by my name. Yeah.
Great.
So
great,
course
great.
name with the term in January, I taught. So actually, currently these are all advanced courses. These are not
Great.
basic courses.
Okay,
it is not basic programming or basic math.
Okay.
This is more advanced.
Okay.
But I guess if the students who are interested in my work, they could learn something if they attend those classes, or if they watch those videos. So in January term, it was arithmetic circuit complexity, which is exactly my area. So it's a very advanced course, but they can get a flavor about. I mean, just from the first few videos, they will get some flavor of what kind of problems we are studying, what is the model, what are the questions.
Correct.
And then in the term which was supposed to start in July, but it started in September because of COVID. So in the September term, I am teaching computational algebra and number theory.
Okay.
And every semester I will upload a new course, and then after a point, we will repeat them. So I will have five to six courses in the next 2-3 years. So that is, I mean, these courses by me or from somebody else
might come.
Yeah, so I'm sure that your students already attend NPTEL, so they can attend these and then they can learn. Mostly my PhD students who have done these courses many times, they have experience, so they answer the questions. So there is enough support, I guess. Yeah, so that is one venue, that is one concrete place where they can go, NPTEL, SWAYAM videos. The other things are, I mean, they have to then, once they have done the courses, they understand the topics, then they have to see, let's say they have to see the web pages of the faculty in India who are working in those areas, what are they working on, whether they have open positions, whether these students can go and do masters and PhD with them.
Okay, so this all projects related information come in the web pages only.
I wouldn't say project, but at least the area.
Okay.
I mean, what are the publications of the faculty? So first of all, what is the area of the faculty, and whether the faculty is active in that? So you will check the activity by checking whether the faculty is publishing with students or whether the faculty is publishing at all.
Great.
So those things are usually available in the internet. I mean, you can go to the web page of the faculty, or you can go to scholar.google.com. So scholar.google will have the list of publications. So from that you can get an idea. Okay. Accordingly, you can decide. I mean, internet is infinite.
Yeah.
So they can get all kinds of information.
Dr. Nitin, you mentioned that you are having some advanced courses on NPTEL. May I ask you, sir, are you planning to put some basic courses also, which may help many students? Yeah, any basic courses also in future?
Yeah. So one course which I will put in the future, which I think is already there by other instructors, is on algorithms.
Okay.
Yeah. So there will be an algorithms course. I'm sure that it is already there.
Okay.
By somebody else.
Okay.
But obviously, when I teach it, the syllabus might be a bit different.
Okay.
So there might be some differences, but
repetition can be there, I suppose, on NPTEL, sir, or not? I mean, can there be repetition?
No. So I think NPTEL will not offer similar courses at the same time, but in different terms. Obviously, they repeat.
Okay. Yeah, my related question to what you mentioned about NPTEL, Dr. Nitin, is like I was seeing IIT Madras has started some of the courses for students. I think they are paid courses or something. Okay. Is IIT Kanpur also planning something like that in future, like professors or somebody is providing short-term courses to the students for machine learning, artificial intelligence, or something like that?
By short-term, so you mean giving a degree online?
Maybe some kind of some certification course, like IIT Madras has recently started with some bodies.
So I don't think there is any plan for giving online degrees.
Okay.
But online courses are already there.
Okay.
Many IIT Kanpur faculty teach online courses.
Okay.
And this is almost always through NPTEL.
Okay, that is through NPTEL only.
Yeah, it is through NPTEL, but there are many courses from IIT Kanpur faculty in many departments.
Okay, okay.
And then obviously if the student gives an exam,
okay,
then based on the exam and the assignments, they also get a certificate.
Great.
That they did this course well.
Right, right.
But there is no degree mechanism.
There is no degree as such. Okay, okay. Dr. Nitin, I think I've come to an end of this great session, and I'm really thankful to you. You answered all my queries very satisfactorily, giving total time to us. And I'm very sure once it is published, it will help a lot of the students to know your views. And it was quite motivational for the students. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for this. Yeah, thank you for doing this. You are creating a very good medium.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.